Well, welcome for those who are just joining us. Good to have you here. And of course, make sure you put your name and chapter into the chat there so that Trey and team can take attendance. Uh, Happy August. We'll go ahead and get started here. So happy August and welcome to our last session of Amplify DU for summer 2025. It is wild to think that we're already at this point, and that we started on June 23rd, and we are at August, what is it now? August 5th, which is wild to think. And really looking forward to August, and as we jump into all things fall recruitment in the school year. I'm looking forward to seeing some really good successes from chapters and what you all do. For tonight, our main focus, so a couple housekeeping items as always. Trey and Nam, and I know Sam's here from the recruitment coaching side. They'll keep an eye on the chat. They may be throwing some pieces of information for you. We were just talking actually before we let everyone in about the recruitment toolkit that we provide and how amazing that has been for some chapters and even our growth team that's about to head out at the end of this week to our expansion sites. So they'll throw some information in about that, and then obviously answer any questions that folks may have. So just keep a lookout on the chat there. If you do have questions, feel free to throw those in there. Uh, and additionally, appreciate Trey and Nam keeping an eye on the waiting room for us to let anyone else in who might be joining us here as we get started. So, what is our last session really going to focus on? So, we think about our first four sessions. Obviously, a lot of it relates to kind of the different aspects of being successful in recruitment. And ultimately, what I wanted to spend time on tonight is talking about execution. And so as we think about it's getting into August, unfortunately, right, like for undergrads on the call, you don't want to think about it, but school's starting here in the next couple of weeks for a good majority of you. If you're on the quarter system, I know I was. You've got a while. You got about another month and a half. I always know that was nice, but then again, we went well into June before we ended the spring semester. So with all that to say, it is really time to execute the plan that we have created, the plan that we have been talking about, the plan that I know you all have been working on as the VPs, as the presidents, as the recruitment committee members. And it's really time to think about how we are actually putting what we have been talking about, putting these ideas into action. And ultimately, as I was going through prepping for tonight, I was thinking, what do we really need to think about? What are things that are going to ground us in tonight's conversation? And I was kind of looking up quotes and thinking through kind of past webinars that I've done for Amplify, past things that I've said to chapters when it talks about execution. And I think this quote that I found kind of sums it all up pretty well, right? Execution is everything, right? Until we actually execute, it's all just talk. And I think that's something that I've really focused on this summer with a lot of chapters, is that, we can talk, for hours upon hours on what we need to do to be successful in recruitment. Who do we need to reach out to? What do we need to do on social media? We can share the numbers and the data that we did on that second webinar session. We can talk about how we developed the right recruitment committee. And that is all stuff that needs to happen. But until we start executing what we have talked about, it really is all just talk, right? A plan is not ultimately going to get us the members or the recruitment number and the goal that we're looking for as we head into the 25-26 school year. What's going to do that is actually executing. And so tonight we're going to spend some really intentional and strategic time talking about how we go about executing our plan as we think about fall recruitment coming up. Obviously, I know a lot of you on this call have already done a ton of work this summer doing outreach, setting the relationships. I know there's a handful of you on this call with some of our chapters who have already recruited individuals. And I know he's not on the call tonight because he had another prior commitment, but Levi Dewey from our Kansas chapter. He's the VP of recruitment. They have done a ton of work in this summer. Already have 23 signed bids, and now they're looking ahead to that formal recruitment process, right? And that's very typical of the Kansas experience. I know Nebraska's doing the same thing. K-State's typically there, and so I know some groups are have really executed what that plan looks like and are here to really talk about how do we execute moving forward. And I know there's a lot of you who are getting really excited to being back on campus so that you can really put your plan into full execution as you started to execute some of these other things since the end of the spring and really over the course of the past 3 months. So, like I said, tonight's really about talking about execution because up until this point, it's all just been talk. We need to go execute this plan. We need to go figure out how we can best be successful with the plan that we've created. So, to kick us off, I think first and foremost, when we're thinking about executing the plan that we've created and the plan that you all are continuing to work on, I think the most important piece, or one of the most important pieces, is communicating what this plan is. If we are going to go execute something that you, as the president, VP of recruitment, recruitment committee, recruitment chair, assistant to the VP, the advisor, and alum, have been working on, we can't be the only ones who know about it, right? We can't have 1 to 5, 6, 7 people be the only ones executing the plan. We have to go communicate what that looks like so that we can allow for the entire chapter to do that. And so it's incredibly important for us to think about how we are communicating our plan and why that is important for the chapter. And so, first and foremost, what you will see on this screen are kind of 3 different high level and key pieces when we're thinking about communicating our plan to the rest of the chapter. So, first one, and if you've been filling out your recruitment template and your recruitment worksheet that's due on Friday, and I'll make another plug for it tonight here at the end to make sure folks are submitting it. And thank you to chapters who have already submitted it. I think I have about 5 or 6 who have submitted those plans already, so I appreciate that. Um, First and foremost, you'll see that part of that is scheduling a recruitment training session with the chapter. This is ideally in person, but it can be done virtually if needed. Just kind of depends. I think a lot of chapters are able to do this in person, given the fact that a majority of the chapter is getting back prior to the first day of classes and prior to recruitment. But it can be done virtually if you need it to. But we need to schedule a dedicated time to have training and have a communication on what to expect, right? We need for them to understand what are our events, who are our go-to people, what are we looking for in terms of membership criteria, what is everyone's role when it comes to this plan that we've created. They need to have a good base understanding of what recruitment is going to look like as we head into being back on campus for the fall semester. Additionally, this is a great time to host workshops. You may be sitting there and being like, hey, we need to work on as a chapter, just general kind of communication. Like, what questions do we need to be asking? How do we approach a PNM? What are some things or some follow-up pieces that we can do that every general member can do? And so a recruitment training session allows for you to do that as well. And it's going to help you further execute your plan. Because if you're asking your chapter members to have these conversations with potential new members, you want to make sure that they feel prepared. And I'll show a couple different examples of a few different chapters that do or what they do in terms of what a recruitment training session looks like within the chapter. I will also note that if you are curious or want to run anything by your recruitment coach or the growth team or myself in terms of, hey, here's what I have planned for our recruitment training session. How does this look? What should I add? What should I take away? Please reach out to us. Let us help you be a resource for you as you're planning what that training session looks like. And then ultimately, if you are saying, hey, I want to make sure that this is top of the line training session for the chapter, Hayden or Sam or a member of the growth team, can you help facilitate a virtual session? We are happy to have those conversations on when that could be and how we can go about doing that. Prior to me leaving staff the first time back in 2021, I did that for a handful of chapters. Boise State and Western Illinois come to mind specifically because they were groups that I clearly remember having a very, very productive training session with. Typically, those are going to last because it's virtual about an hour, maybe a little bit over an hour, just from the time span or the time attention piece for folks. But we can get a lot done in an hour when we're thinking about kind of best practices when it comes to recruitment. In terms of the recruitment training session, when we're communicating the plan, you do want to make sure you're giving yourself ample time. So I would make sure you're scheduling for an hour, maybe 2 with the chapter and be very, very clear on what that time is going to look like and be very productive during that time. The second piece when we're communicating the plan, and I've touched on it a little bit, is you're ensuring that members know the recruitment goals. They know the events. They know the expectations. They know their role. They know their responsibility. Ultimately, it's about being on the same page, and that is key, right? If you all know, hey, our goal for the fall is to recruit 20 associate members, and you're not communicating that with the rest of the chapter, you may have chapter members who say, hey, I think our successful recruitment is recruiting 10 associate members. Yeah, that is a way off number, right? If you know that there are 6 events within the first 2 weeks of being back on campus, and the general member doesn't know that and think there might be 2 or 3, yeah, that's also a huge issue, right? If the general member thinks the expectation is to just show up to events when they are quote unquote available, but your expectation as an exec board, as the VP, as a recruitment committee is that they show up to 80, 90, 100% of the events, but they don't have that, that hasn't been communicated clearly to them, then you're not on the same page and there's going to be disconnect and there's going to be things that you all are going to have to deal with that might take away from your time in terms of executing the plan properly and spending that time working and building relationships with PNMs. Now you're having to deal with resetting expectations with the chapter members. And so clear is kind, be very clear, be on the same page, let them understand what they need to know going into the fall semester, right? Let them know what you've been working on, right? Like if you've put a ton of work in over this summer and creating this plan and doing outreach and maybe even having a handful of guys that as soon as they get on campus, you're going to start bidding. Let the chapter know that. Communicate that there's already stuff happening in execution. We're not just starting from scratch. So when you communicate what your recruitment strategy and plan is, it's going to ensure that everyone is on the same page. And ultimately, what that's going to do when we have these training sessions, when we talk to our members, it's going to answer questions, it's going to address concerns, and it's going to field ideas, which are all three very important pieces as we think about executing, right? Members are going to have questions, what do we need to be at? Why is our goal the way it is? What does our criteria look like? Do I have to be at everything? Whatever the case is, they are going to have questions for you, and you are going to be able to answer those and address those. They may have concerns about, hey, there's too many events, right? Yeah, I just don't feel comfortable with how recruitment's looking. Whatever the case is, you can address what those concerns are and talk through that with a member, either as a group or able to then pull them aside and have more of a one-on-one conversation with them. And then ultimately, what I love about what happens when we communicate what our plan is, when we have a recruitment training session, is it allows for us to field ideas, right? We as a recruitment committee, and I had this when I was an undergrad, and I've seen this in working with chapters, is sometimes we can, have 5 or 6 people on my recruitment committee and there's only so many ideas that we have, right? And we need that, right? Because we don't want to have a committee necessarily of the entire chapter, but there might be ideas that a chapter member brings forward to you as you're communicating that you can then implement into the overall strategy and plan. And I think that's really helpful. So be open to that. We'll talk a little bit here in a second about flexibility when we think about executing the plan, but we want to make sure chapter members feel heard. Some ideas that they have might just not be possible for the fall, but we can think about how we can implement them later in the fall or going into the spring. But it allows for some good, healthy conversation there. So definitely be open to that. And I think when we are communicating what our plan is, we are allowing for the chapter to be on the same page. We're allowing for us to answer questions. We're allowing for us to address concerns. We're allowing for us to hear other ideas. All of those are incredibly important to ultimately being able to successfully execute what our plan looks like moving into the school year. So after we've communicated the plan, part of that, as I mentioned, is our recruitment training sessions. And two that I just want to quickly go over, and I shared these back in January. So if you were on a January webinar with me, you've seen these before. But two examples that we have that I think are good in terms of just like seeing the outline of what these training sessions could look like are Kansas State and Purdue. And obviously, things were working for Purdue with this session because you just don't go recruit 82 members last year without having some success in making sure your chapter is prepared. So I think they're a great example. And I think Kansas State has just sustained success in their recruitment process. So I think these are really two good examples and hopefully give you all some good insight. So the first one being Kansas State. And again, these are on the website as well for you guys. So, don't feel like, this is the only chance you're going to see this. If you go to the Amplify DU page on the DU website, you'll see these resources there as well as all past Amplify DU webinars. But what you'll see here is Kansas State, this is back in 2023. They have different sections, right? So they have Recruitment 101, what are questions we can ask PNMs? I know in a previous Amplify session, we've talked about, hey, creating a resource that allows for us to share with the chapter different questions that they can be asking PNMs is really helpful, right? And some of these questions are incredibly good conversation starters. They're open-ended and allow for us to have some good conversation there, right? They have a section on like what not to say, right? We're not going to talk down about other fraternities or sororities. In their case, if they dislike the food, just don't really say anything about it. But we can also have some good conversation around there, and don't talk poorly about any other member of the house, right? And then they have, I think, big piece here is what are some things to highlight? What are some good things that we as a recruitment committee, we as an exec board, feel like should really be highlighted within the process? So kind of they break down what that looks like for them. And I think this is helpful as you start thinking about, hey, how do we make sure members know? Because sometimes we don't always remember some of those highlights that we have within our chapter, especially as we're coming back from the summer. We may remember just two or three of them or things that are kind of front of mind, but we need to think about those other, leadership opportunities, the Global Service Initiative, educational programming opportunities, service hours, like all of the pieces there. They talk about how their advisors and alumni are super involved and how that's going to play a part in a PNM's experience. They talk about different events that they have. Substance-free housing is really important, what some achievements are on campus or internationally, some brotherhood events. And then they get down to kind of house tour. So if you have a chapter house, obviously you want to make sure your members know how to talk about the house, some of the just the fast facts about the house. So they go over that with their membership in their recruitment training session. And then obviously some discussion points generally about the house there. So this is a really good example of just providing their members with information that they think is important. Doesn't mean that the members have to remember all of this, but it does allow for the member to say, okay, there's a lot that I can talk about, a lot that I can share, a lot that I can sell when I'm talking to a PNM, and it's just not the VP of recruitments or the recruitment committee that's doing that. And I think overall, these kind of last 3 points are really good, and I think good foundational level to share with all chapters. Right. So recall good memories and appropriate stories for each stop. Make it personal or for each thing that you're talking about. We want to be able to share about DU, but we also want to share stories, allow for that PNM to understand what that looks like. And a recruitment training session can help spark some of those for our members. Don't forget to ask them about themselves, make them feel comfortable, right? So we talked about that. How do we effectively build a relationship? We want to make sure that it's a conversation and not necessarily a one-way interview or something that, we're only talking to the PNM about, but the PNM is also active in that conversation. And then make the connection with the PNM on a personal level, much more important than facts, right? Like people join people. We all join because we built a relationship with somebody on a personal level. They obviously shared about what the organization was about. We were able to read and understand what the organization was about, but somebody got to understand us and got to talk to us more on a personal level. And so when we communicate our plan, when we have these recruitment training sessions, these are all important pieces to remind chapter members about and giving them examples of what that looks like. So that's a K-State example. Purdue's another example that I like to share. So this is again back in 2023. So this may have evolved a little bit. And I'm sure Will's working on that. I know Will, you're on the call. Good to see you, man. So kind of, they talk about like what's important, like what do you want to get out of the chapter, right? And ultimately it's like, yeah, well, if you want to get X out of the chapter, like a lot of that can't be done without recruitment. Like we need members to do a lot of what we want. So it's incredibly important that we're growing, and we're doing that in the right way. They have practice, and I think this is one where it's like, hey, let's think about who we might be able to add to our names list. Who have we met? Who do we know from our high schools? We taught, I think for them, it's a lot of practice on like how do we have right conversations, right? Talking about the DU story. Why did you join? What are things that you want to highlight? All things that sometimes just getting the reps in is incredibly important, and the recruitment training session can do that for you, right? Thinking about, what are some red flags to spot with PNMs, right? And just kind of helping them understand how do I have that conversation, what to look out for. Again, a training session allows for you to do this and allows for the chapter members to feel more comfortable. I think a lot of guys might be like, oh, yeah, I know how to do recruitment. I know how to talk and I know how to do this. And I don't think that that's wrong, but we can always practice and we can always be better. Right. The best, college football teams right now aren't just saying, yep, we have the talent. We got the five-star recruits. We've got the older guys. We're just going to go out in a couple weeks on Saturday and just go absolutely destroy, right? And just go win our football games. Nope, they are practicing every single day, getting better, refining their skills, honing their skills, learning something new. And so let's take that mindset into what we need to be doing within our chapter members for recruitment. They kind of just give a structure with how recruitment's going to go, who gives a bid, who's recruiting, can we, is it an open invite for people to come to the house, right? Like helping, again, setting those expectations. And then similarly to Kansas State, what are just some general chapter stats? Why are those important? And then kind of the wrap up, what are the expectations for recruitment events? So again, feel free to go on the DU website, kind of use this as a template for your recruitment training session. And again, allow for this to be a key point into how we communicate and ultimately execute our plan there. Um, with that, it jumps us into kind of things to remember, right? So when we're thinking about communicating our plan, three big things that I think are really important. Clearly share the why. Why is recruitment important for the chapter? Why did we establish our goals and expectations the way in which we did? And why is your engagement as a member important? I think individuals, and something I talk to chapters a lot about is, if we just say we need to recruit because that's what chapters do, yeah, like for a lot of us that makes sense, and that's why we're in the work that we do. That's why you're the VP of recruitment. That's why you're the president. But members sometimes need a little bit more, right? Like if we want to have a larger philanthropy, if we want to do more with other organizations on campus, if we want to increase our budget, right, and maybe not feel so financially strapped, recruitment's important, right? If we want to continue to make our mark at our specific campus, recruitment is important. If you live in a chapter facility, fill out the chapter house and make sure it's full and lively and there's, community and brotherhood, recruitment's important, right? And so we need to share why that's the case to our members. And we need to share like why is our recruitment goals? Obviously there's the IHQ expectation, but in a lot of cases for you guys, your recruitment goal is higher than what we set, which is amazing. And thank you all for doing that and setting the bar high for your chapters. Ultimately, we need to talk to members about why that is the way it is and why we set the goal to be that way for the fall, for the spring, for the year. And then why is their engagement important, right? Five, six, seven guys on recruitment committee necessarily can't do it all. We need to make sure that PNMs are seeing the chapter as a whole and as much as they can. And so it's important that members are engaging in that way. Second one is like give the members the tools to be successful. You saw in both Kansas State and Purdue's example, that's what they did, right? So like what not to say, what questions to ask, clear expectations, what are some stats, how to do a house tour. Here are all the information for events. So when a PNM asks you, you can clearly tell them, here's our process, here's our structure. Like give them the information they need and even just give them that one pager so they can and send that out so guys know what to look for there. And then the last one, like have fun with it, bring the energy. Like if you are facilitating and you're doing the session or you're talking about recruitment, like the energy that you bring is going to be the energy that the chapter is going to have for the most part, right? So if my energy's super low, if I'm not looking forward to it, if I'm not excited for it, like how can I expect the chapter to then be excited for recruitment, right? But if I'm bringing the energy, if I'm saying, look, guys, like we're optimistic, we put in all this planning during the summer, we've got this many guys on our names list, we've got this going on, here's our recruitment plan, here's why it's important, here's the why we think we're going to reach our goals for this fall, here's the work that we're putting in. That's going to get guys, higher likelihood that's going to bring the energy and get guys more excited. So come at it from a really high energy state. I think sometimes we've seen, or I've talked with groups who have used recruitment training sessions, and they're like, look, we'll provide lunch, we'll provide food, we build that into our recruitment budget, or we have some budget for that, right? Or the alumni or advisors are, have been kind enough to offer that to us, right? And so they kind of pair it with something, or they say, hey, let's do the recruitment training session, and then we're going to have like a brotherhood kind of informal hangout afterwards, right? And we're just going to kind of set the tone and get ready for the summer, and maybe we'll invite some P&Ms, right? So you kind of make it something more than just like 2 hours at a recruitment training session. So your chapter's best, but I've seen chapters do that in different ways there. I see some things popping up. Awesome. Thanks, Trey, for answering those. Just want to make sure I didn't miss anything. So now thinking about executing the plan. Obviously, communication of the plan is part of actually executing the plan, but I think, there's other important pieces we think about when we actually think about the actual execution of the plan that we've created. I think these four things are ones that come to mind initially for me. And so I really wanted to hone in on the four that you see here on the slide. First and foremost, be consistent, but be flexible. Any good plan is going to be executed if you have consistency and you don't stray away from that because you hit a roadblock early on. But also, a good plan allows for us to be flexible in that process, right? Keep the plan top of mind, but also acknowledge the need for some change, right? Meet with and communicate with the recruitment team daily. Talk about what's working, what's not working, what are issues we're seeing, what are concerns we're seeing, what are successes that we're seeing that maybe we weren't too sure about, and allow for some tweaks during the recruitment process that may help you further execute the plan or be better when it comes to recruiting potential new members, right? So I can clearly remember. So my first recruitment as VP when I was an undergrad, I was new to the role. I did kind of a spring recruitment, brought in, I think, like 4 to 5 guys. It wasn't huge. I was still trying to understand what everything looked like. And I remember uh, working with my committee, and we were like, okay, it's going to be 2 weeks in the fall. We're going to have an event pretty much every single day. We're ready to go. We're going to be texting guys. We're going to do all these things. 3 days, about 3 or 4 days into recruitment, my recruitment team came to me and said, man, guys are starting to get burned out. Here's what we're hearing. Here's what we're feeling. The texting is working, right? Because we're following up with guys, but can we flex some of these events, right? And maybe make them a little bit smaller or change it up. And so we made the cautious and intentional decision to change some of those events and move some things around. Had another, right? And one of my other committee members said, hey, Fridays are a day where I think we can really capitalize on doing more dinners and lunches with guys that we want to really take to the next level. And so we added Friday lunches kind of ad hoc at the beginning of recruitment with guys that we were either bidding, had bids, and we just wanted to like take them and kind of close the deal. And so that really helped us as well. And that's something that we figured out kind of early on once recruitment started. And so we were consistent with the rest of our plan and texting and making sure guys knew. All of those pieces, but ultimately we knew we had to be flexible in that. And so encourage you to do that. It's the same idea as if like, we've got a plan going into the game. And then at halftime, we're walking into the locker room and we're changing some things up, but we're not completely scratching the entire game plan midway through. We're being flexible. We're making tweaks based off what we just ran into in that first half. So think about what that looks like. And I know our groups that have been able to do this have seen the most success because they're consistent with it, but also can be flexible. Keep the chapter advisors, everyone else updated, me, your recruitment coaches. share updates on events, P&M progress, needs. I think some chapters kind of keep this to themselves, but it's like share when you had, some bids that got extended. Share when bids have been accepted if your process allows for that. Share with advisors and alumni, update them. Here's what we're running into. What ideas do you have? Hey, can we have a quick phone call? That is what advisors are here for. That is what I'm here for. That's what even your fraternity and sorority life office is there for. So the more that you communicate and share those updates, even if they're updates that aren't always positive, but could help create a conversation to then change some things up, definitely do that. Don't feel like you're on this island as a VP, as a president, as a recruitment committee member. Keep that conversation going because ultimately, the best way to execute that plan is when we're having those conversations and having those updates. Third one, I think this is huge. Like, celebrate your wins throughout the entire process, no matter how big or small, like, celebrate it and keep the momentum going. This is anything. Like I was just there's a group that I'm working with. They're doing summer recruitment. They're a smaller group, and they just got a bid accepted today. It's their second bid in 2 weeks. I'm celebrating that with them, and I am saying, man, that's amazing. Continue to do that. Continue to put in the work. Continue to get bids out. We just don't need to celebrate when recruitment's over. We can celebrate during recruitment, right? Celebrate a good conversation. Celebrate if a guy tells you, he's excited to accept his bid at the end of the recruitment process. Those are all things we need to be excited for, and it keeps that momentum going. And I think for the fourth is remember that last year was last year. 25, 26 is a brand new year with new opportunity for the chapter to grow. We can learn and think about what lessons and what tweaks and mistakes happened last year. But last year does not define this year, right? And so, as the VPs, as the recruitment committee members, even as the advisors and alumni, like, hey, let's not spend too much time dwelling on the fact that maybe fall recruitment last year wasn't as successful as we wanted it to be. It's a brand new year to do brand new things. There's another chapter that I'm working with, like their recruitment last year resulted in 5 associate members. They have put a ton of work in this summer, really with this mindset that like last year was last year. And they already have 3 accepted bids, and they'll probably get to hopefully that 6 to 7 range with here in the next week or two, which already matches what they got for the entire fall semester, right? And instead of sitting in this, well, this is what happened last year, this is what's going to happen this year, they said, no way. We're going to make sure that we put that in the past. We learn from what we didn't do last year, which prevented us from getting a larger class, and we implement that this year, but we're not going to dwell and spend too much time in what that looks like. So always remember that. Doesn't mean you can't talk about what happened last year, but let's be productive in those conversations there. So now action item, right? So we've talked about communicating the plan. We've talked about executing the plan. You guys know what time it is in the chat. Want you to think about we're at August 5th. What is one action item that you are going to be working on starting today that is going to make your recruitment planning, your executing your planning, your communicating your planning 1% better? So go ahead and throw it in the chat. Would love to see what you guys got for me. Jason, communicate rush expectations. Definitely getting all brothers on the same page. It's an awesome action item, right, Gabe? It's like, hey, you've been working on having an effective meeting. Yep, Jack. Looking forward to meeting with you and Kyle and really having that effective meeting, getting that plan worksheet figured out, and then going and making some good progress there at Christopher Newport. Josh, getting all members on board with recruitment. Yep, I think let's get them out of that kind of summer slump and let's get them excited for bringing in new guys there at Western Illinois. So I know you guys, coming off some good highs there from LI. So let's definitely capitalize on that. What else? What else? What other action items are we seeing? A couple more we'd love to see before we close out Amplify for the summer. Gavin, making sure general body, not just exec, participates. Yeah, like that's a big one. And Gavin, I know we've talked a little bit about what that looks like. Happy to talk more with you about what that looks like there, and how we can get the rest of the membership to do that. So love that that's front of mind for you guys there. Austin, have an effective line of communication for rush chairs so we can adapt to event changes. I love that, right? Like sometimes if we are not understanding our communication with our rush chairs, they may have stuff that needs to be changed or that we can adapt to. And if we don't have that effective line, we don't know what that looks like. So, Austin, again, if you need help with that, reach out to one of us. We'd be happy to kind of talk through what that might look like. Shane, making sure I bring up rush expectations and why we need to recruit as a smaller chapter at our plan and deliver workshop with exec and alums. Exactly. Yep. Like I think Shane, you guys are prime to do some really good recruitment, but we also need to make sure the chapter understands like what good recruitment can look like for the chapter there at San Jose. So looking forward to the work and appreciate the work you've been putting in this summer and just getting everything prepped. Will finalize recruitment training. Who will have help lead it? How long should we have it? Figure out what to say. Yep. So that's part of it. We just need to figure out what that training looks like. Um, and I know you've got a lot of good resources there in West Lafayette, both advisors and on-campus support. That's going to definitely help you out and make sure that training goes well. So appreciate you guys sharing. I'm excited that you all are thinking about these different pieces there and how that's going to be successful. And hopefully you all keep that top of mind as we move forward. One of the big ones, so real quick before we get into questions, a very, very important reminder that chapter recruitment plans are due this Friday, August 8th. So again, I've had about 5 or 6 chapters submit those to me. I know some are on this call. Thanks, Jason, North Carolina, Tyler at Alberta. Luke at North Dakota. So appreciate that. But please make sure that you are getting your plans in by Friday. If you have any questions, please email me or text me. I'm happy to walk through that with you. But please make sure that you are getting those submitted. We want to have those on file so that we can best coach you and your chapter throughout the entire year. And so I'm able to store those. And then when we have our one-on-one meetings or we need, hey, what's happening here at X chapter, we can go in, see what the recruitment plan is, follow up intentionally, and be strategic about what that looks like. So please make sure those are submitted. If you need the template, that should have been sent to you last week as a reminder, but if you do need it, please email me. Not a problem. I can get that over to you fairly quickly there. But with that being said, want to see if there are any questions from folks. Feel free to put it in the chat, or if you want to come off mute, that works as well. So I'll give folks a little bit of time to see if there are any questions. And it doesn't have to just be about this Amplify, but anything in general. All right. So hearing none, one more reminder, chapter recruitment plans are due this Friday. And obviously, thank you. There's my email. There's my phone number. Please feel free to text me. Please feel free to email me. Thank you to those who have already done that. It's been great kind of communicating that way. And it's also been great talking about setting up these calls. I think I have 21, 22 recruitment coaching calls between this week and next week, just prepping. And I've got availability. Trey and Nam might say Hayden doesn't if you look at my calendar, but I do. If I can find 30 minutes, 45 minutes for a chapter who's wanting to dive into recruitment, I'm going to necessarily find that time for you guys. So if you are somebody who wants a recruitment call here within the next 2 weeks, just to talk through anything, please let me know. And looking forward to the calls that I have coming up with a handful of you on this webinar. But I want to just say thank you. And yes, Trey, if I'm busy, I will make sure that I've got my team on it as well. I appreciate the reminder there. I want to just thank everyone. I have thoroughly enjoyed this summer. Amplify is one of the things that I look forward to because I think it takes advantage, as we talked about, around this quote unquote off season. Although, as we all know, there is no off season when it comes to recruitment because we are year round 365. But it's been amazing to see the participation. It's been amazing to hear that chapters are just putting in a lot more work this summer than I think maybe they've had in the past, which is the purpose of this. And it's setting a tone and a foundation and a culture and an environment within the fraternity and within your chapters that we can continue to grow. And we are putting in the work to go be successful, not only this fall, but also in the spring, but also looking ahead to the next year. So thank you for your time. I know the recruitment coaches are very thankful and have appreciated the participation from you all. If you all need anything, there's my email, there's my phone number. Please reach out to me. Go enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. Go enjoy the rest of your week. I'm excited to see those recruitment plans come through. And I'm even more excited to see what recruitment looks like. So appreciate everyone. Have a great rest of your night. And please let us know if you need anything.